All right, it's that time of the week where we get to discuss issues related to you, your career, your workplace, your productivity, your knowledge, where we actually open the school for learning higher education. And of course, you can call it the adult education that you get to have through radio. You're welcome to Office Journal right here on Smooth 98.1. It's 8th of August 2023, 2 minutes past 11 o'clock. My name is Oluwaseun, and it is Smooth 98.1, where we love music, we love life, and most importantly, we love you. So thank you for being there and ready to go on the trip with us. So before now, I told you that we have put up the flyer on our WhatsApp status as well as our Instagram and of course Twitter as well. So you should be subscribed to us and also click on the notification everywhere that you're following us so that you do not miss out on any information that we serve there. At Smooth981 on Instagram, at Smooth981FM on Twitter. I have told you like a million times that we are talking the issue of legal knowledge to have before launching your startup. These days, it's as if everyone has a startup. It might be an exaggeration, but at least chances are that you know someone who knows someone who has a startup, or maybe you're thinking about it itself. But what exactly is a startup? How do you define it? Different people have different definitions for startups. We'll get into the definition. What makes a startup, and what you should know before launching your startup, or maybe the things that can help you stay afloat, especially legally, so that you do not get into trouble or after giving birth to your baby, somebody takes it away from you. And I do have a special guest in the studio. You can join us live on YouTube. It is youtube.com/smooth 92 FM Lagos. And my guest has cognate experience in information technology, law practice, data protection and privacy, AI for law and law for AI, gamification of law, intellectual property, robotic governance, Web 3.0 and the metaverse. He is a co-founder of a legal tech startup that is called WeCreate.com and also a principal member of the Lawyers in Technology Initiative and a team leader at Innovation Law Club Africa. I am referring to a legal practitioner, evidently, and technology advisor. That is Fernandez Marcus-Obiene. Good morning.
All right, good morning, Shayon. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. It looks like the ones who are in tech do not like to, make a lot of noise. Just cool and just in
Yes,
your
yes,
zone.
yes. My people don't like to shout, so me too, I don't shout.
Yeah, because the money has already
Uh,
secured the vocal cords.
oh, well, yes, it's somewhere there, somewhere there.
How's it going? How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good today. Could be better if things were better in the economy. But
Uh, yeah, we know the song, but don't worry, it will get better eventually. You know how it is said, it gets darkest before dawn, right?
my complaint about things being better, I mean, things are generally better in the ecosystem. It's just that you spend more. So,
We'll be fine. Eventually, we will be fine. As Nigerians say it, last,
yes,
we'll be all right.
sure, sure.
All right, coming down to the topic of this morning, we're talking about startup and, of course, the legal knowledge to have before you launch it. Now, I am fascinated at how many people describe startup, and I'll give you just about three before I ask you for the definition of startup. So, according to one person who is the creator of the Lean Startup methodology, that's Eric Rice, he says a startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Now, another person says a startup is the living embodiment of a founder's dream. And I particularly found one very interesting from Sacha Nitseka, who is the founder and CEO of Mentor Forward. He says a startup is a job you cannot quit and that does not pay and which you cannot live without.
Okay.
Quite interesting, but all said and done, how exactly do you define a startup?
Okay, so first of all, I like to say I agree with all the definitions that you have there.
Okay.
You know, the definition of most things like startup is the situation of the elephant where some blind men are asked to describe an elephant and
Yeah.
then one touches the tail and says it's like a snake. The other touches the leg and it's like, it's a tree. You know, one touches the trunk and they say it has a very sharp object, it's sharp. So, but all these things define the elephant, but they're different. So, personally, I like to look at it from two different perspectives. All they've said fall into one perspective while there's another. So the first is the general perspective. You're just starting a business. So when you are starting a business, in the general sense of the word, it's a startup. You're just starting. But there's the more accepted definition of people who are starting out a business, like they say, to solve a particular problem with the aim of scaling, to reaching a larger audience. So
Hmm.
if somebody is just trying to sell akara on the road, in the second sense of the word, that person may not be a startup. But if you're looking for a system that will enable more people to sell akara or to sell akara at scale for several people, and then you're just starting out, then in that sense, you're a startup.
Okay, so now that you've mentioned it, I'd like us to be more clear about it. So people daily people do have a business that they are starting, but it might not necessarily be a startup. That you're starting a business doesn't mean it is a startup. So I want those distinguishing factors that makes a business a startup.
Okay, so I'd said that you're starting out in the general sense of the word. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
normal English now, a startup is something that is starting out, really.
Yeah.
But for the proper sense of the word, for the startup, first of all, there's the way. First of all, you're trying to solve a problem and you're looking to
One.
scale.
Yes.
So you don't have your offices, the roles in your office in your work are intertwined in the sense that you have one person probably doing today is doing social media, the next day he's going to do management, and then he's running around. So the rules are not clearly established. There's also the fact that money itself is not necessarily coming in. At least the money you need for
Mm.
the business on large scale is not necessarily coming in from the business. Probably coming in from investors or the people that started the business, and they're just putting their money. So the business has not got into the height where it's supposed to be. You also have a situation where the name, the recognition, it's not gotten the market share that is expected to get. So if ordinarily there are 50,000 people that you want to get, so 50 million people rather that you need to get, and you're only doing 200 people, at that point, yes, at startup level, you haven't gotten there. There are quite a lot of things. Everybody has his opinion, but essentially at that point, you're not established. You've not gotten to where you want to be in terms of skill, in terms of money coming in terms of sustainability. So if the founders left the business at that stage, will the business stand? Those are things that one looks at to determine to say, yes, this is a startup.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarity. So that in case somebody is defining their business as a startup, now they know better. The number one, your startup has to be solving a problem, right? Has
Yes.
to be filling a gap, and definitely you're starting from the scratch. You're looking to grow, and of course, the other ingredients in there. Okay, we'll take a short break, a first one for this segment, and when we come back, we will be going further into some of the meets and maybe clearing up some of the things that have been wrongly believed about startup. One of it definitely is to shed more light on tech. Do you have to be in the tech space for you to be a startup?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
We'll come back
interesting.
to that right here on Office Journal on Smooth 98.1.
98.1. The
My voice
biggest
too.
reality TV
No,
show
it's
in
it's good.
Africa
I had
is
to amp it up
back.
though.
Get ready for
I'm a
double
village boy. When I'm
wahala
talking to
as the
one person,
stars pepper
I have to
them
use
so
my
they
own
can
voice.
level up.
I
Ah,
learned it when I
This
was still in
season is
university.
bigger,
When they asked me again, I
louder,
was like,
and the
no.
yeah.
chance to
You just have to
win
come close to it
is
so you
too
talk properly.
sure.
I mean, it's
Spend lesser
better
time
for
scrubbing
radio
with
since you can always
dishwashing
boost your
liquid and enjoy
voice.
more exciting
Yeah.
moments as you tune in
So, but
this
that's not the thing
All-Star
why I talk
season.
about your culture.
I don't
Pure
expect you
Shore
to be.
dishwashing liquid,
Else
not be
the
washed.
the how do they call it?
The medium of
Your
exchange,
lords
the
or your
currency that
lordship will throw
flows
you
through the
out.
veins
Well,
of
interestingly,
any
there was one
viable
time that he
economy.
asked them to please give
Your
him the mic. Please
money.
give him the mic.
Tune in to Smooth 98.1 for a definitive
No, but
weekly
for the most part,
analysis and
one
check
has
on
to
your income.
Yeah,
talk
your
with his
voice. Yeah.
voice.
The rich don't work for money.
It's
Okay.
all about your finances made easy.
What a way to run your life.
Personal finance on Smooth 98.1 every Wednesday from 5:15 p.m.
If I were you, I would set the reminder for tomorrow on Smooth 98.1. Personal Finance is the name of the show, and 5:15 is the time right here. Where it's not public finance, it is finance made easy for you so that you know how to gain more money, spend money, invest it. I have learned that you do three things with money, nothing outside of the three things. Number one is you can either waste money, you can either spend it, or you can invest it. So those are some of the things you get to learn when you listen to Personal Finance here on Smooth 98.1. Right now, you are listening to Office Journal, and my name is Oluwaseun. I have got my guest who is a legal practitioner. His name is Fernandez Marcus-Obiene, and you can join us live on YouTube. We are discussing the issue of startups and the legal knowledge to have before you launch it. A quick recap: we have told you about the definition of startup. And one of the key things that you cannot remove if you're defining it is that a startup has to be filling a gap, has to be solving a problem, and of course, it has to start from the scratch. But now the question is, these days, you find a lot of startup in the tech space. It's almost as if you have to be a tech bro or a tech sis for you to find or to start a startup. The question now is, do you have to be in tech, or does your startup has to be tech oriented before it can be defined as a startup?
So nowadays, almost everything is tech. I mean, where we're using all these things we're using is tech. The YouTube channel, the radio channel, everything is tech related. But in that sense of the word, perhaps. But generally, you don't have to be rooted in tech. I mean, tech can assist your process. It assists everything everywhere nowadays, but it doesn't have to be rooted in tech. Even though a lot of the startups we talk about, fintech, etc., are tech companies, there are lots of them that are not tech, that are not rooted in tech. So we have, for example, education startups, we have retail startups, we have food and manufacturing startup. We have different startups in different areas. We have agri startups. Again, we have different aspects, each of them providing a service for that particular area. Of course, the truth is, the reality is that today there's hardly anything you will do. You will not use tech. If you start using your phone, you're using tech. If you're using your laptop to print something, you're using tech. But then, and not everything has to be rooted in tech if that's the intention.
Okay, thank you. Now, at what point does a startup cease to be a startup?
Okay, so it's not a one day. So there's no specific time. It's not really how do I describe? It's not linked to a particular time. It's not. You cannot say 5 years. Generally, some people will say after after first 5 years, you probably are no longer a startup. But it's not the reality, and it's also not linked to when you have a lot of money. For you to for starters, you have setup. So when you start out as a startup, you probably have very few employees. But at that time, you have skilled. You have multiple employees. You have directors. You have all those people who are managing different aspects of the business. Then in terms of market share, you've gotten to a level in your market share where you're servicing a lot of people. So, and then you also have your business has come around together. If the founders go away from that business, the business will continue. It doesn't necessarily need the founders. Probably have more managers who are doing the work. There's also the money aspect, which is that you don't need investment to work. Your products are producing money by themselves. So at that point, you can see that you're out of the startup business. But of course, if you've not gotten to that, there are different parameters really. But essentially, once you have gotten to the place where you are on your own and you're doing a good job without the need for funders, at that point you're no longer a startup. You're now an established business.
Okay, hopefully some a lot of startups get to that stage. But the truth is, according to data, it is said that a good number of startups actually will fade out or die within their first 5 years. Some actually in the first year.
Yes.
So that brings us to the question of some of the things that you can do as a startup founder to ensure success. And let's start with the legal. Okay, before I even go to the legal aspect, from your knowledge and experience, what are some of those things that a person who has a startup can do to ensure longevity and of course success?
Okay, I think the primary thing is planning. But although in reality that you can't plan for everything, but then you do some planning, you get in. You also ensure that you have the right documentation for everything and everybody. There's certain small disagreements that can affect you. You also have to watch out for compliance issues because certain issues, if you don't comply with certain things, you might find out that. Okay, let's give an example. Facebook was recently fined. Was it $2 billion? Dollars? Was it 2 billion? $2 billion for data protection violation in the EU.
Yeah.
So imagine that your company is providing that sort of business, your startup is providing that sort of business, and you're fined 2 billion. You'll be out of business because you may not have that 2 billion. Facebook may have that amount of money, but a lot of startups don't. There's also issue with finances. I'm not a financial advisor, so I'd rather not talk about those. But essentially, you have there are mostly legal issues and planning issues. There's also issues with intellectual. Let me not go into that because I know we're going to go into that properly. But those are the issues essentially when you fail to plan and you don't have the never die attitude because every morning you wake up as a startup at the start of your business, you have to face challenges. You have to quench fires every day. You have so thing. You have this employee who has done this. You have been reported to the police. Some businesses are going to the police on a regular basis, especially fintech and credit related companies are going there on a regular basis. So they need to have that presence of mind to know that we'll do this every day. I wake up in the morning and do this every day. There's also the fact that the founder may have lost interest. There are also unfortunate accidents. Maybe somebody in your family died. One of the founders is dead, etc. So these things can adversely affect a startup, and then make it to crumble in the first year or in the first few years.
I can't even imagine a startup, a regular startup, being fined 1.2 billion euros or 1.3 billion dollars. It's like your entire generation, in fact, the people yet unborn,
Yeah.
will be
Yeah.
paying that. But now going to the legal knowledge that you have to have or be armed with before launching out. Where do we start? Drafting and signing agreement?
Well, yes, I would say drafting and signing agreements, and there are lots of agreements that you can sign. I should sign. But before I even go on to say further, I'd say, I don't think that one needs to know everything, even with the law. And I don't think that there's one lawyer that knows everything. But what you need to do as a person is you can hire lawyers. You don't necessarily, and even there are some that will do some work for free. There are pro bono, there are law clinics that afford you the opportunity to learn. There are some lawyers that provide sort of services in like they put into a package and sell it to you, so you're able to get a number of things together and work on it. But I think the first one of the more important things is you should get a lawyer or at least legal advice for certain things. So then once you've had that, you have things like agreements, the founders agreements. The founders have to have agreements between each other so they know. I mean, it's easy to start a business and say, I am going to, yeah, we know we are friends, we are going to take 50-50%. But then when you put everything in it, when you don't put it in an agreement, it can be that, okay, at some point, say we agree 50-50%, but what if you don't do your work?
Mm.
What will be the consequence if you don't do the part of it that you're supposed to do? Or what if you're supposed to bring money and you stop bringing money? Or what if you die? Should I give this your 50% to your family? Can you sell it to another person? These are things that can be settled if there's an agreement, the comprehensive agreement, the founders agreement. There's also things that you do with third parties, non-disclosure agreements, NDAs that you do for essentially everybody that has an idea about your business. To ensure that information, things that you're using in your this thing does not go out to third parties. So there are lots of agreements really depending on the kind of business that you do, but it's important that everything you're doing, everything you're starting out, everything is on paper. You know how they say the faintest ink is better than the best brain,
Yeah.
because the brain will die, somebody will die, and every brain will be gone, but that thing that's written on ink will stay forever.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay. Crystal clear agreement. That's one thing to hold on to. And can people sometimes shy away from this because of the amount that is involved. Although you mentioned while you were explaining that pro bono, right?
Mm.
So it means that the startup founder has to keep a lot of money to have the best services, starting with legal. I mean, if you're going to draw agreement, you would definitely need a good lawyer, right?
Oh, yes, yes. So first of all, I like to start from this perspective. If you're going to make money from something, then it shouldn't bother you to spend money on it.
What if? Okay,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
okay,
So,
hold on.
so somebody you're going to be providing a service and you expect to get paid from that service, right? So the other person, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's an accountant, whether it's the publicity person, whoever is providing a service, that's what the person is trained to do. So ordinarily, you should want to, or you should be happy to pay that person. I mean, you don't want to give the person all your money, but the person should be happy to do the work for you. And yes, you need some money. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have the money now. I know a few companies or a few lawyers who are able to say, okay, I'll take a percentage of your I'll take maybe I'll take some money, but I'll take a percentage of the shares in your company when you reform it, so that I'll provide social services. Some are able to say, I will take money, but then we'll spread the payment out so that you're able to pay long term. If you are able to do pro bono, but I mean, yeah, there are a few that will do pro bono, not very many, but then there are a few that will do law clinics. But if you want deep, in-depth services provided, obviously it's best to hire a lawyer, and a good lawyer at that. It's good that you have not just a lawyer, a good lawyer.
I
Uh,
like how you already talked at one of the things I was going to ask for clarity. And the part of I will take a few percentage or I'll take some shares.
yeah,
Now, a startup founder might not necessarily have all the money. Remember, some of the reasons why some people go into finding their start or starting launching their startup is to solve a problem. They
yeah,
see something and they just want to solve it. So they might not necessarily have the money.
yeah,
But what sometimes they can get desperate as well in trying to raise funds. So I want you to help someone understand some of the things that can be eventual pitfalls in terms of, okay, I don't have the money to pay you now. I'll give you this percentage or I will give you this amount of shares in my business. And before you know it, it comes to bite them in the behind.
yeah. So it comes to the same thing I said about the agreements initially. It's easy to say do this, but when you have everything clearly in black and white, especially if you have a good lawyer, I cannot overemphasize it's important because there are certain items that should be in a proper agreement, whether it's an investor's agreement, whether it's shareholders agreement, whatever it is, it should be clearly written down. So you have things like what you're supposed to do. There are things like vesting cliffs where if you're able to provide this thing for the first year, you will get so percent. If after 5 years you're still doing this thing, you get a higher amount, but for now you don't get this amount. And then there are things that cover eventualities. What if you die? What if in the process you are unable to, your company, the company that is sponsoring you crashes? What can you do with money? There are things like the amount of shares you're having. You know that a startup would ordinarily want to maintain majority shareholding in its company, because if you don't have majority shareholding, the other person will make the decision for you. You also, even if you don't have majority shareholding, even if you have majority shareholding, there's an extent to which a person who has reasonable shareholding in your company can affect adversely your business. So you want to put that into consideration. Again, that's why it's important, I say, for you to have, and I don't just limit it to lawyers, really, professionals. I know that it's difficult to say, but sometimes you can go to these people, have questions, you can follow referrals. Okay, talk to this person. Who can we talk to? Who can we talk to? You can find the important persons. And sometimes friendship, buying lunch for somebody can even be helpful. You take out somebody for lunch and the person knows you can't afford certain things, but you say, okay, I can give you some information to some extent. But you do that and you manage. Again, just like with any partnership, you have to know the person, you have to trust the person, you have to do your due diligence before you enter into any sort of contract with anybody. When I was starting out when in the early stages, we're still in startup phase anyway. But in the early stages of my own legal tech startup, somebody had introduced some men, people who are running similar business, and I didn't feel comfortable with them. Once you give me somebody's name, I go online, I check where the person is a director in a company. If he's this, I go and check everything, do my due diligence. If I'm not comfortable with that person, at the time I wasn't comfortable with those people, so I said no, I'm not doing business with them. But you look at the person's track record, what has he provided before, the companies that he has invested before. If he's someone that wants to invest, how have those businesses thrived? Because sometimes investors and partners don't just come with money. Sometimes they come with experience. They can give you good advice on how to manage your business. They can give you access to connection. If I want to invest in a business and I see that a certain fund or a certain VC has already invested in that business, I'm happy to invest because it shows that that person is trustworthy. But if you have somebody who has a bad behavior, other investors will run away. So those are some of the things. Of course, I'm now delving a bit into financial and other advice. So I'll just come back a bit for lawyers. But the truth is, you have to know your people and you have to do your due diligence.
Well, actually, it's part of some of the things that we were supposed to touch on, and I'm glad that you're already touching on it. But before we take a break, something you said about the experience and the other parts, one of the things that I've recently learned about wealth is that money definitely hides in people, it hides in experiences. And of course, you can't just limit money to the paper, right? To the currency.
Yes.
So sometimes you might not necessarily have the cash, but if you have people, you are equally wealthy. So the summary is that learn to acquire and nurture relationship, because there are times that those people will even give you something that money might not be able to. So that's one tip for you, startup founder. We'll go on that break now, and when we come back, we will be going further to business registration, especially in Nigeria, how it might be a little bit stressful when you're trying to do one or two documentations, how to go about it easily. And then we'll go further to tax. Yeah. If you're joining us for the first time, this is Office Journal. We're talking about legal knowledge to have as a startup founder. You can stay with us because we'll be right back in about a minute plus. This is Smooth 98.1. Oh boy. Right, so our AC malfunctioning. I think we're just going to
multiple stars are aligned
leave the door
for the
open.
ultimate showdown.
Okay.
I have
So
to go.
what do you think?
I have to go. Biggie is calling.
It's the return of
You don't
your
think
faith
anything?
in the first ever Big Brother Ninja All Stars.
Why don't you
Get
think
ready
anything?
for Edge of Your Seats drama, showing 24/7 on
We have a lot
DSTV
of
channel 198 and
thoughts.
GoTV channel 49.
Share one of
Get
them.
and stay connected.
Big Brother Niger All Stars is
Everything
proudly
you are saying
sponsored
is
by
in line
MoneyPoint,
with
powering
what I
dreams
actually
in
have in mind.
association with HFM, online trading at its
Maybe
finest.
we should give him another mic.
Your number
Maybe we should
one
give him
contemporary radio station.
another mic. Yeah.
My name is Richard Moffett Damage.
How about you, Sean?
Smooth
How about you, Sean?
98.1 because they play my kind of music.
About what today?
How's it going?
Oh, it's going quite lovely. Very, very lovely. Very lovely. So this is me trying to speak and at the same time.
That's
And get with your favorite program on Smooth 98.1 as you start your day on the
I
Smooth
like this your
Breakfast
screen.
from
This your
6
screen. I
a.m.
want to go and change my
Which part
house.
of it?
And
This
get
one?
No, the
served
entire
a
thing. I want to
perfect
change my
blend
house
of news
office.
and entertainment from
So this
around
is
the
a
world.
tech-ish kind of thing, where you can
It's
go from
3
one screen
hours
to the
of
other.
soulful
I know,
music
so in
from
my
10
money
a.m. to
partner's office,
get
he
you
has
through
two
your
screens.
mid-morning while you work to pay those
But they're not
bills.
as big. They're small.
And it's
one
music
screen.
on the menu come
I think
lunchtime
I'm
from
going to
1
get some
p.m.
other
as we
things.
take you on a
And
musical
I'll
journey around
So
the
this is
world
about where
with
we have to
cross-borders
charge you for what
to
now?
help you
Inspiration.
discover new sounds and
Yes,
Now,
inspiration.
for
I'm
that
actually
smooth
you
ride
for
back
coming here
home
to
after a
talk.
hard day's
It's
work,
a
we've got
mutually
you covered.
beneficial
Mutually
stuff.
beneficial.
Oh my God! Never get into an argument with a
And
lawyer.
more
For
you'll
God's sake.
ever need. So while you lay back, let the
No, you can leave it
smooth
open.
sessions from
While you're
8
talking.
p.m.
Yeah, are there people there?
into
There are
the
people
night
there.
with the
Hopefully they
finest
keep
of
quiet
smooth
once they see the
R&B
on air.
and even more on the weekend for the smooth experience. So get with the program on Smooth 98.1.
Come on now.
Now, back to our regular schedule.
And you're welcome if you're joining us for the first time. This is Smooth 98.1, where we love music, we love life, and it is 28 minutes past 11 o'clock. You're welcome. My name is Oluwaseun. The show you're listening to right now is Office Journal. And Tuesdays from 11 till 11:50, we discuss different issues about office. This morning, it's about tech start. Oh no, it's not tech startup. It's tech startup. I think I've talked so much about tech that it is getting into my vocabulary, or maybe because my guest this morning is very much in the tech field. And you can join us on YouTube. It is youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. I've discussed quite a number of things, but you can go back later to catch the stream. And before the break, we talked about drafting and signing agreement. And one thing you need to be very careful about is your agreements. Let everything be crystal clear. No loopholes, right? Nothing that can be taken advantage of. So going to the other aspect, business registration in Nigeria for a startup. How do you go about that?
Business religion. I don't think it's that difficult. I actually think it's quite easy.
Really?
Just if you have like I said, if you followed my instruction from the beginning, have a good lawyer, it's quite easy. I know that, but for the startups we're talking about, which are startups who are looking to scale, we are looking to make several millions. I don't think it's expensive, but maybe for the other people who essentially are not looking to scale at that level, maybe it might seem expensive to you. But yeah, it's not really that difficult. And usually a short period. I mean, you register a company, and then there are different kinds of registration. I should start with that. Depending on the kind of business you are. So traditionally, a business should be registered as a limited liability company, LTD. But there are certain persons who want to register as a sole proprietor, as a business name. And that way, the business is you. You are the business. If the business is owing somebody, you are the one that is owing. If the business is sued, you are the one that is sued. If no money, they will go and collect the money from your personal account. So there's no even though the business may have an account, Fernandez Enterprises may have his own account. But the truth is that your account is also forms part of the business. And of course, you are required to. There are certain financial requirements. You are supposed to keep different accounts and all that. But you are personally liable for the things that happen in the business. There's now the limited liability companies, or in some cases, limited liability partnerships, where you're only limited to the amount of shares or the amount of shares you've purchased in the company or you own in the company, not necessarily purchased. So if all of you have agreed and we have so million shares, if anything happens, the only thing that can affect is it doesn't affect it doesn't affect me personally. The company has a business account, it has board of directors, it has different things. So if the company is owing money, it's a company that's owing money. Me, I'm not owing money. The company can be broke and not have any money. Me, I have plenty money. I can be a billionaire and the company is bankrupt. That's one of the differences. There's also the agreements. Certain kinds of transactions you want to do require that you're registered as a company as opposed to a business name. Those are the two. Of course, there are those that are limited by guarantee, but those are more technical ones that are not very rare. There are unlimited liability companies. So certain kinds of businesses require that the individual, even though it's a even though it's a company per se, they want the liability to be the individual to be liable, certain groups, but again, those are rare. The most known are limited liability companies and registered businesses. Again, best idea is to register the business properly as a company limited by shares. There are also some other registrations that may be required to be done. So if you're an advertising practitioner, for example, you want to register with APCON, Advertising Practitioners Commission of Nigeria, sorry, APCON, Advertising Practitioners Commission. And if you're, depending on where the area that you're in, they have different registrations for different. I'm sure you people are registered with the bond. The different these things are required. If you're registered in the financial sector, you want to register with the CBN. If you're in the insurance, NICOM, different.
different,
Yes,
okay.
you have your different. You have to ensure those registrations first. In addition to the initial registrations you've done, if you have a foreign director or shareholder, you have to get a business permit. And if he's a director, if he's a staff, you have to get expatriate quota. Quota rather, so that the person can work in that business. Those things are, they have the different. If you are getting investment money from abroad, you also have to register, with the CBN essentially, so that you can be able to export your this thing when it's going away. So there are different registrations that are required to do. Again, it's important that you have a competent lawyer who knows about all these things before or at the time you're registering, because he will help you sort it out.
Wow. Sounds number one like there are a lot of registration. And number two, you just need to get a good lawyer and make sure he's well fed, well paid, and he's happy with you. Else, I can imagine you not being aware of one of these things, and it can, woof. All right, then. So going on to, I think another reason why you need to hold your lawyer close.
Sorry, advertising is cancelled rather. The
Okay.
APCON is cancelled, just so that my people don't think I don't know what I'm saying.
Okay, still another one that definitely needs you to hold your lawyer close is tax. Okay, so what are the taxes involved for a startup here in Nigeria?
Okay, well, that depends. Again, depends on the sector. There's the general companies income tax, which almost every company pays. If you're registered as a company, limited liability company, you pay. There's personal income tax, which is paid by the individual partners if it's a partnership or a business name. Then there's also, of course, personal income tax for employees that you pay. There's VAT. Then if you're a technology company, you may be required to pay a different tax. If you're in the oil and gas sector, you are required to pay their own taxes. So it depends on the sector, but generally you have company income tax, VAT, and a personal income tax that you are required to pay generally. There are also some, they say we have multiple taxation structures. There are certain local government taxes that you may be required to pay depending on where you are. If you're hotels, there are certain taxes for use of television. There are also certain levies, even though they give it different names for their taxes. But the truth is that compared to, if you look at all of them, especially for a small business, it's not so much as to crumble you. But the bigger the scale, the more the taxes. So again, it's important that you manage your tax well. There's also that's what we call tax avoidance. At this point, I have to differentiate between that and not paying tax at all. So there are tax avoidance strategies. So you set certain things that are allowable. So for example, the directors of the company, they put certain assets in the name of the company, certain actions. So okay, let me go back. One of the differences between a person and a company is that a company is taxed after it spends money, while the person is taxed before it spends money. So once you earn your salary, they've already taken your tax, but the company income tax is taxed after you have dealt with all the allowable expenses. So the tax laws allow for certain things to be allowable. So for example, your company can decide that as part of your bonus, you will take care of certain expenses for the directors or for certain species of employees. So those things are now tax deductible. There are certain things that you will do purchase and you will be allowed, you will not be taxed on them. So you have to do what you call tax planning at the start of your business to ensure that you are paying only what you are required to pay tax for and nothing more.
Okay. All right, then. I hope you're taking notes. You can also ask your questions if you have any. It is 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp line for you to ask your questions. Just remember to include your name and location. 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp line. All right, moving on from tax now and talking about how to protect your intellectual property. That is a major one, and I know it's one of your specialty.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So nowadays, intellectual property is one of the biggest things. I mean, after privacy, I think it's one of the biggest things that we're talking about. And now, intellectual property, especially for startups, things like your brand name, your logo, items that you produce, written items, musical work, those things have to be protected. There are also if you produce gadgets or physical or any of those things that we use, you have to patent them, whatever requires to be done. And it's important that you take care of these things at the start. You don't want to go into a battle where you're, for example, at the time you're starting a business, you're sure that that thing is available and free, at the registration stage, and then you want to go and go to the trademarks registry to ensure that you register that trademark and it's you. And in registering, you may be doing business in a number of areas. Okay, let me just clarify something now. So I may be doing, I might have a trademark, my logo, for example, and I register it for one class. There are about 6 classes for different things, and I register it for only food and beverages, for example. And then somebody is building, and I register the name Fernandez, and then somebody is building houses, and is using a similar name for a similar trademark, and then you go to make noise about it. Now there are issues with it. You have to ensure that whichever businesses that you want to cover, you are trademarking all those classes, not just one. But then again, it's difficult to give all of that advice here. I mean, again, like I said, a lawyer, who knows? And then there's also business secrets. You want to sign non-disclosure agreements with everybody that is working in your system, your employees, so that they don't go and give out things. There are also non-compete agreements. You have things that employees learn while they're in the job. You don't want them to go and use it in particular other areas that are in the same business as you, so you don't steal things that are ordinarily supposed to be for your business. There are also beyond trademark copyrights, things that you produce, your copy, your marketing strategies, things that you've written down, you need those to be protected so that no other person, gets to use it, at least copy it verbatim. Products, pictures, other things I use. I mean, those things they seem like they're not a lot, but they are quite a lot, and it can become a bit of a problem later. You can have 2 companies, assuming one is not, you're not registered. You register it and something looking like this Smooth FM, and somebody goes and writes for Smartin FM 22, but exactly the same thing, and then somebody comes and looks at it and it thinks it's your business while it's not. Depending on this thing, I mean, you want proper legal protection to ensure that you can be able to sue that person, either stop that person from using it or to get money from that person for using it. So that's an additional way. And then, of course, when you've registered your intellectual property, it's not just enough to register it. You have to also follow through. You have to be vigilant, to watch to see that these processes have that nobody's infringing on your right, and then you have to take action. Sometimes it can be a letter that you write to the person to say, "Oh, this is my right. Don't use it. This picture belongs to me. This content belongs to me. Don't use it." Sometimes it gets as much as going to court to enforce those rights, applying to the. Sometimes somebody wants to register a right with either the patent registry, trademark registry, anywhere, and then you go and say no. You oppose the registration because you already have those rights, etc. So those things they're very important. People make a lot of money off these things nowadays, and then there are things like licenses. So you have a product and you want a lot of people to use it. You want to give them some level of access to it. So you say, okay, you can use this for this purpose, but you don't want to use it for this other purpose. And anytime you use it, you pay me 20,000 naira. Again, this is one way that people make a lot of money off intellectual property. You put out, say, you have a system. Let's look at that. You have a system for payment, for finance, for example. You set up a payment system, and that is unique to you. You are registered it. So whenever a third party is using that system, the person comes to you, gets a license, uses it for his system. Every year he pays you whatever it is, the amount that people are agreed on, and then you consistently use that. So that's one of the benefits, a financial benefit, a direct financial benefit, apart from the one that somebody has violated and the person has to pay you money. But this is a positive benefit of protecting your copyrights.
Thank you. Now, before I take the questions on WhatsApp, that you can keep coming, by the way, it is 0809 444 0981. That's the WhatsApp line. Please include your name and location, 0809 444 0981. Because of what you mentioned, I would like to go back to it. So in recent times, I'm sure you can be a witness to that. You see some brands, how there is, I don't know the word to call it, but the first comma advantage, where when someone breaks into the market and the person is the one that comes to the product first, chances are that people make reference to them, even if it's just a product. Whenever, that good, they call the brand name. But there were people who enter the market, right? And they also leverage on that. Maybe if it is a drink, for instance, if a drink comes, a product comes, or a brand rather comes into the market, and they decided to have maybe green and white logo for their brand color and everything that is associated with the brand. Now another entirely different brand comes into the market, makes that same product, and starts using the same color. I am guessing from your explanation that that person has a right to sue them.
Yes, depending on the circumstance. So again, you have to be sure that it has to cost that second one that's coming has to reasonably resemble what you're producing. And if it does, if a reasonable person walking down on the street will see this one and assume it's yours, then it's a problem. But I mean, there are copycats, there are knockoffs. There's one interesting case where a high-end clothing manufacturer, somebody did the Ghana must go version of that and put the name, and it's named as similar. The court in that case held that it was clear that it was a knockoff. No reasonable person purchasing the second one would assume that it's purchasing the first one. So there are instances like that, but essentially the idea is that a reasonable person on the street should be able to see this one and know that it is not the same person that's producing. Once somebody is able to see it and say, it's likely that this person is the one that's producing, or even think and buy it before he realizes, then that's a problem. So yes, you can sue, you can tell them, you can get them to stop, you can get them to pay you money, you can get them to go out of business, you can get them to change their logos. There's a recent one, I'm not sure, I recently saw the news, I can't remember the name of the company anymore. I think it's one of these events, it's Eco Atlantic, I think it's a yearly event that they do in Eco Atlantic. And some other person sued them that they are using a name that's similar to theirs.
We'll try not to mention the name.
Yes, it was. I know it's not like I can't remember the name exactly, but I think it's quite popular in the intellectual property world. And then recently, the Nigerian group came out to say, okay, we've decided to change our name and rebrand so that to avoid any intellectual property issues with that other company. So it does happen.
Okay, all right then. Added knowledge. You can send the messages like I mentioned to 0809 444 0981. Tax definitely is a big deal. And Henry from Lekki says, please clarify. As an employee, is the company supposed to ensure personal income tax is sorted following deductions, or the employee is to make the remission? Also, please, what is the calculation or the percentage for these deductions by the company if you have to remit it?
Okay, so the tax, the personal income tax is done on depending on how much you're earning. So it's a graduating scale. So the person that's earning, for example, 50,000 naira per month will not necessarily pay the same amount of tax as the person that is earning a million naira per month. So these things are graduated and there's a scale for payment. So it depends on your individual, what you're earning as a salary. And yes, there's the pay structure that we have now that the employees remit this directly. So for example, I've not paid my personal income tax myself for years. Before my salary comes in, it's been deducted. But then you have that calculation. You as an employee needs to know how much is being taken away for your tax, and you have to ensure that the tax is actually being paid. So you have the accounts in case that you need to do there are certain transactions you may need to do as a person. So for example, if your cousin is in prison, is granted bail, maybe you have a police problem and you need to go and stand as a shorty for bail, they might require that you have tax clearance, and also you need information as to your tax information, so you're able to use that. So you can ask your employer for those, but those are usually remitted from the employer level before it gets to you, and there's no specific amount for different, as opposed to VAT, for example, that is 7.5. Also for personal income tax, it's taxed on the basis of how much you earn.
Okay, thank you for the clarity.
It's not, and that's not the only deduction. No, there's pension.
Yes.
There are other deductions depending on the area you are. There's housing. There are different.
I wouldn't say most companies, but at least a good number of companies actually outline it for you, the deductions and your final take home, the net, the gross, and everything.
Yes.
So some of them do. And if you're not sure, maybe you can ask your HR manager for such.
When I'm discussing employment, or when my colleagues are discussing employment, when we ask how much you are paid, or when we ask the HR how much you are paid, we're not asking you how much net, how much gross you are paying.
It's the
We're
net.
asking how much I'm going home with after tax, after all the deductions.
Yeah.
So even when you're going on to, you're discussing employment with the employer, you're going to want to ask that question: how much net am I going home with? Less the deductions that have been made.
Thank you. Well, Cisco Delgado says, good morning. Good morning to you too. Says, remember that two people can answer the same name, same surname, etc. I don't think that two companies having same brand of products will be an issue. Well, that's not even the issue. The issue is not the same brand or the same product, but the same branding for it.
So aside copyright, there's also the issue of passing off. Again, it's still the same thing. Somebody is using a name or something that looks so similar to yours that a third party will be mistakenly think about it. There's a classic case of Nigeria Pharmacy versus Niger Pharmacy a long time ago, a question of, you see the name Nigeria Pharmacy and Niger Pharmacy, there's a question already about that. But there are lots of them like that, so it's, first of all, it's not possible for two companies to bear the same name. There has to be some differences. At least one or two words has to be different in the two. So for a company register, they have to have that. Individual persons may have the same names and surnames, yes, but for companies, you cannot have the same name, the same name. So that's one. Two, you have different ROC numbers. Again, your products can be similar. Of course, if you're in the same market, both of us, Coke and Pepsi are producing Coke. But,
No brand name.
huh?
You're
Oh,
mentioning brand name. Yeah,
sorry.
you're so into your world.
Sorry. So the popular beverage companies, you see the two of them, you realize that okay, both of them are, but when you see one, you know that this is this. When you see the other one, when you see the new ones in Nigeria, you know they are this one. So once one starts copying the other in such a way that it looks exactly like that one, then you know that's a violation of trademark.
Well, thank you. Hopefully, I did not get an invoice, and if I do, well, I am glad that your pocket is deep. You shall be, paying it for me. Thank you. Well, Cruz, hello to you too. Been a while. All right, so the last one, we're almost out of time. I just want to talk a little bit about fundraising for the startups and the ones that will not help them to end in trouble. Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay, so one of the key things for startups to scale up is money. When you start out with your money or money of people around you, your friends, your family. Again, I say if any of them is going to end up as an investor in your company properly, so I'm going to earn income and have rights in your company, it should be documented. Now, once you've passed that stage and people start and you want to get money from a third party, again, it's important that you get an investment agreement. The more popular one is the safe agreement for future equity, but I'm not going to go into that. It's called the safe agreement. But there are a lot of others too. Essentially, sometimes they will say, okay, we'll pay you money, but this money can in the future be converted to shares in the company. And I had said it earlier that you also need to do due diligence on the persons that you're investing in, or the person that's investing in you. Again, if the person has a history of companies that he's invested in that have not succeeded, you are careful. You say, okay, no, you don't want to be that person. You also have to know the personal behavior, personal style. Then you also don't want to put so much pressure on yourself. So you are saying, okay, yes, I don't want to give you 50% ownership. Maybe I'll give you 20% ownership. Again, if you give somebody, for example, you have less than 51%, it means that certain decisions cannot be made by you. Those persons have to be involved in certain decisions. And then if you have multiple shareholders, multiple investors, so sorry, when at the initial stage when you're investing, you also want to know that other people still come and invest. So you want to allow for space for you if you need to sell more shares for yourself, give more shares, get more investors. Yeah, that's it. You essentially just want to be careful. You want to do due diligence on everybody and make sure that everything is written down. Everything, every point is written down. Every eventuality is noted in that agreement. What you can do with the copyright, who owns the copyright, who owns the license to use certain things, who need permission for certain things. It is clear, because sometimes investment may not even necessarily come in funds. It might be, so for example, a license to use a particular thing. So you have companies where an international company says, I have this line of products that I will allow you to use for a particular period in exchange for so number of shares in your company. Those are things, and they may help your business. Those things can grow your business rapidly. It can also be contacts and connections that you're giving to shareholders. Again, due diligence, ensure that there's paperwork for everything, and like I said, get an experienced legal, not just legal, accounting to counsel.
Okay, thank you so much. We're already out of time and we have to go. But I think it's been quite enlightening for at least two person. Now, for people to keep up with you and of course get to know more about what you are about. Gabriel, for instance, is asking about that because he has some issues with tax. So how can they do that?
Well, I usually say my number is a public toilet, but I would not call it. You can meet me on LinkedIn. I'm the finest on or across all social media. Just look for at the finest. I mean, the name is Fernandez Marcus-Obiene. That's the name. Dot the handle at FERNIST across, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. LinkedIn, but you can just search for. I think I'm quite popular on the internet. I have a very good digital presence. So if you search for Fernandez Marcus-Obiene, I'm sure you'll find me.
Okay, thank you so much for your time and, of course, the legal knowledge and wealth you have baptized us with. We are appreciative of that. Next week, we will be back. And guess what? Next week, we're talking about retirement. We are talking about retirement, something that a lot of people dread talking about and maybe do not have plans and structures in place for. So, we will talk about that, and it means you have to set your reminder for it. Thank you again for your presence, legal luminary. Am I correct?
Luminary is such a big word, though. Just speaking like a lawyer.
Kidding, of course.
Competent lawyer.
Thank you. All right, then on the other side, it will be more smooth music, soul music for your listening pleasure right here on Smooth 98.1. And you can find the replay of the video on YouTube. It is youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. Bye.
Ah,
Thank you.
scale of 1 to 10. I like to do that all the time.
11 over 10.
Why?
Sorry, can you help me in the video? Because it was, if not because we had to put some short or cut some short, I'm sure we could have gone 2 hours talking about this topic. And that's
The Office
my
Journal
measure of
of
success.
Smooth 98.1.
Oh, your wife said she enjoyed listening. Oh, look at that. Oh my God. What is that? Yeah, so one of the markers of success for me is